It's all very meta.
I just stay behind the counter. I don't
No, you're not anymore. Now you're friends.
No. I'm going to do something big on here. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, everybody comfortable? They have their wine. They're good. Okay. First, I just want to say thank you all so much for coming, supporting Kim McCreight and our local bookstore. So many familiar faces here and some new ones, and I appreciate you all. Before I turn the event over to our two lovely hosts, Emily Fine and Chris Wallach from Book Cougars, who run a great book podcast. So if you're not tuning into them, you need to. Before I turn it over to them and Kim, I just wanted to say a few words that I normally don't do. Besides thanking you all for being here and thanking Kim and Chris and Emily, I wanted to say that I first met Kim McCreight in 2014, January of 2014. We had opened the store 3 months before that. And I went to see her as a fan at a different bookstore. And I said to her, I just opened a store. If you ever come to Connecticut again, I'd love to host you. And she immediately said yes. And I was blown away by that. As a New York Times bestselling author, someone that I was a fan of, who I loved her book. 4 months later, she came to our store in our old location. And it was great. And she's come back for every book that she's published. She legitimized our store. We had, the best turnout ever when we hosted her. So I can't thank you enough, Kim, for supporting small independent bookstores. And without further ado, thanks for driving from New York every time. I'm going to hand it over to Emily and Chris and Kim. So thank you all.
Well, hi, everybody. Kim, thanks so much for being here. We just wanted to do a little bit more of an introduction about Kim. Kim is a graduate of Vassar College and the University of Pennsylvania Law School. She's worked as a litigation lawyer in New York City. She's the best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, as Cynde said, of 2 adult mystery suspense novels, Reconstructing Amelia and Where They Found Her. She's also a marathon runner and a baker with a competitive streak. More to come on that. But she's a baker, too.
They're going to take her out.
I know. Reconstructing Amelia was nominated for an Edgar Award for Best Novel and was optioned by HBO and Nicole Kidman. In their review of Reconstructing Amelia, the New York Times wrote that it is a mystery with enough red herring to stop Lake Michigan. And as someone who's originally from Chicago, I can tell you that's a lot of red herring. The first book of her young adult trilogy, The Outliers, was optioned by Reese Witherspoon. And as you all know, the last book of the trilogy, The Collide, just came out this summer. Kim's books are alive with smart, vulnerable, yet tough girls and women, not all of whom make great choices. But what I admire about Kim's stories are that they show how hard it is to make choices in light of the social pressures girls face, how our family histories influence our choices, and the unintentional paths they can lead us on, whether in dealing with friends in their daily life or when running from evil politicians, secret military experiments, and religious fanatics. Guys get a fair shake too, but Kim's focus is on highlighting the real-life challenges that girls and women face and how rigid social attitudes about gender shortchange and stifle both women and men. Rumor has it that Kim is working on a new adult thriller, so I'm hoping we'll hear more about that today, and maybe a little bit about her issue with watermelons.
Thank you, Kim, so much for being here. And thank you guys. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's a beautiful day outside. So thank you for choosing to be here in the middle of a beautiful day. The first question we wanted to ask you was about the series, the Outliers series. As Chris just mentioned, the third one came out. I've had a chance to read it. I don't know if you guys have or not yet. When you set out to write the Outliers, did you know it was going to be a trilogy?
Yeah, I always conceived of it as a trilogy. I actually sold it before it had been written, so I sold it on a proposal, so an outline of the first book or a synopsis of the first book and about 100 pages. So I had completed the first book, I sold it as a trilogy, but I always thought it had 3 chapters, beginning, middle, and end, and really not even because I had read that many trilogies myself, it just felt like it had those three parts. That's how I conceive of it. So even though I didn't have all the details worked out, it's always interesting to see the contrast between how you think it's going to be and how it turns out when you read it. And it's interesting both because it's very similar and in all ways different than what you thought. Like the details are a bit different, but the place you end up is so similar. So I did conceive of it as a trilogy. It's not as though I added the books, and I think if you read them, you can see they conclude kind of an immediate mystery, but they definitely leave off on a springboard to the next. So anyway, so I knew that the place I was going to get to, but not exactly how.
Okay. Yeah, because I thought I read that you're not much of an outliner.
No.
But you obviously had to do some outlining if you knew you were heading into a threesome.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like 3 sentences. So there were times in the process of writing the trilogy where I'm like, an outline would have been good. I can see, yeah. But you know what? You can only do the process that you have. You have your process, and you have to follow it. And if I could outline, it's not because I'm like, oh, I'm so above outlining, I'm so dead, so boring. But it just is not. I can't conceive of the story until I'm writing it. So I would say that the outlines, such as I do them, are more thematic and character driven than they are about like X, Y, and Z is going to happen. So that's what I mean about it having me having this idea, like my character's emotional place will have to start here and end up here, and thematically in terms of the arc of where I want to take the whole story, the point I'm trying to make, you've got to get from here to here. But the details of the story, which is kind of what would appear in an outline, those I don't have down.
Well, and it felt so organic when I was reading the trilogy. Each book of the trilogy just felt like that. I didn't know what was happening, obviously, but I did have the sense that it was just unfolding organically for the characters themselves. I didn't feel like, oh, and here we are now to step B, right, and to step C. And while cliffhanger in book 2, I got to say, really caught me off guard. And talking with Cynde about it, and people who've read it, I had the luxury of reading all 3 of them in a row, and didn't have to wait.
Yeah, people want it for the second one, which I have to say, I like in my own when I'm a consumer of things, I like being surprised in that way, and I did hope to give you enough as a reader to give the reader enough satisfaction in the elements of whatever story I was telling that you didn't feel completely at loose ends. It was kind of meant to resolve and then springing forward.
Yes.
So that was,
Well, with your writing of it during these times that we're in right now, I don't want to give any spoilers on anything, but there are politicians involved.
Maybe. A little relevant. Where we are today.
So much of it. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like from your initial idea of writing about this character, Wiley, or was she the first thing that you came up with, or was it the idea of intuition? Am I asking too many questions?
No.
We want to
question. The idea, I think, it's usually the idea first, right? So the concept of what is something there's definitely a huge gender component. What about something that's been viewed as a potential weakness among women, their heightened emotionality? We're actually this great untapped strength. And so it's kind of starting from that place. Like, what about that idea? And there's actually like a fair bit of scientific evidence at this point to back that up. And also the idea of women trying to be like men. Are we kind of, is it that a fool's errand? So are we trying to be strong in the way men are strong? And in fact, we should just be being who we are as a gender, because there's a lot of inherent strength in that. And equality doesn't necessarily need to derive from sameness. And so that was an idea. And I am I'm a mother of daughters. And so I was interested in that idea. I was also interested in the idea of anxiety and being very sensitive, and how that can play out, and how you can view that as a weakness, but is it really? And obviously that's an extreme. So it's not to say anxiety at all is like a good thing. It's obviously something a lot of people, including myself, struggle with. So it's not a good or easy thing, but it's complicated. And these things exist on a continuum. So those are all the ideas. Again, those are just ideas. And so I always have the same when people come up to me and they're like, I have a great idea for a story. I'm like, yes, that's an idea. That's not a story. Which is great. You need to start with an idea.
Right.
Ideas are important, but they're not the same thing. So then you have to be like, well, who was my character? And so then Wiley came from that. And she's certainly, inspired by my daughters for sure. And so then she came, and then, then you play with the real world, and the spine of the story kind of comes next. And so then, that it's in that way that I develop the entire book, the entire narrative. And a lot of it comes through revision. It doesn't come at the beginning because I don't outline, and it's filled in after the fact. I will say that if you talk about the books being political, like, they did change. I mean, this first book was written in 2015. The world is different now. And so to say that is, as an artist, really to have been writing a trilogy that did already start with very political elements at the beginning, to write it during this time, it did change. Again, without getting too political at this moment here in the store, I will say that I didn't think that the election in 2016 was going to have the result that it did, and so watching the world unfold, that has certainly influenced the way book 3 turned out. And if you read it, that'll be pretty apparent. So it definitely played a role for sure.
I also loved how there's a conversation, obviously, about intuition in books, because there's a question I think a lot of us face about, do we trust our intuition or don't we trust our intuition? And I too am a mother. I have a daughter and a son who are grown-ups now, but I was thinking how much I would have loved for my daughter to be able to read this book when she was a teenager, because it really says, trust your intuition. Intuition is a good thing. And I think with females particularly, it's that question of, are you being too sensitive, or is this your intuition, and should you trust your intuition?
100%. That's it is obviously at the core of the books. And I mean, the tagline of the first book is trust your instincts. So I really believe, and I think again, there's a big message to women that's often given, like, you're being hysterical or oversensitive or over too much. And I think, like, as we've seen time and time again, particularly again if you just look at like the Me Too movement and things like that, that it's a big message given to women to ignore their feelings. And again, it becomes and the books explore this. There's a line, because obviously crazy, very extreme anxiety, you can't be listening to every time alarm bells are going off, because there are times in which you shouldn't be listening to that. And I think to explore where that line is between finding that truth of who you are and the things you should listen to, and when you're like, no, that's extra noise. That's a lifelong process. I mean, that's that is cognitive behavioral therapy. But to explore that is in fact a process. That instincts matter and have value, and I think again, particularly for people who are younger, it's important to learn to value your own voice and your own truth and what that's telling you.
Absolutely. I love the scene in there too, where one of the characters is starting to realize that some of the tools that her therapist has given her actually work.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really great, because I think that is the path that a lot of people go on. But then once something clicks, you cross some kind of line, and you realize, like, wow, this stuff is incredible.
Right.
It's great to see that in young adult fiction.
Yeah, and I think to understand, the books offer the difference to show that anxiety is different for everybody. It's not one thing. And so I think, like, for Wiley, she's actually really fine in an actual emergency. When she actually is able to completely function normally. It's when things aren't actually an emergency that she feels more anxious, which is actually true for a lot of people with anxiety, and it's very counterintuitive for people who are not anxious to understand that, because, like, how could you be a brave person and be an anxious person? Well, actually, like, you can. They are mutually exclusive for everyone. I mean, that's the thing about any of these, whether it's anxiety or depression or anything, it's not the same for everybody.
Right.
And it can manifest in a myriad of ways for people. And I think giving space for that and allowing to be a unique experience for each person is important.
So I would like to ask about the parents in the Outliers trilogy. In a lot of, we talked about the trilogy on the podcast that's going to air actually on Tuesday. and I was talking about Disney parents and how a lot of times in Disney movies, you know, the parents are dead or it's an evil stepmother or something like that. Here, the parents are kind of questionable throughout the entire trilogy.
Mhm.
Can you talk about your choice with that?
As a questionable parent. Sure. No, I will say, first of all, that in my first two adult books, children or die or don't fare so well, and my children were kind of like, can the parents be dead? Because you seem to keep killing the kids. So anyway, so that was a I didn't go out with that intent, but it definitely is it was a factor. So I have looked at both things in across kind of all my books. I think the parents are real and fallible and whatever. And actually, Wiley, I gotta make sure I don't give spoilers, but Wiley struggles at different points with this idealized version of her mother. And that she is this perfect thing. And I think because her mother's not there, it's obviously easier to idealize somebody who's not alive or not in the present. And I think I wanted to explore that too. I mean, the parents are definitely real and fallible, and you know, doing the best that they can under extreme circumstances. So that's I think that's true of most parents. Kind of flailing their way through. They're flailing through a lot more in these books than average parents, but they're certainly flawed and real. And I hope empathetic, and I hope that for all my characters, they're all meant to be kind of real, flawed, and not genuine.
I like that little message for your kids. Like, I'm not going to kill kids in this one, but I'm going to explain parenting.
Right, exactly. So every time I mess up, I can say I didn't mess up that bad.
What's the difference for you in your process between writing books for adults and for young adults? What's the difference for you?
For me, there wasn't a difference. I didn't. I guess I set out knowing these were books for YA, or I guess just because I conceived of it as a trilogy. Now there's more of that in adult. I think you actually do see multiple part books in adult. Obviously, there's a Game of Thrones with many parts. But I guess I just immediately, it was a teenage main character. I didn't immediately think there would be a voice for adults. I just was like, oh, it's YA. But I didn't write it any differently. Really at all. I had my editor at Book Routine. I said, and my agent doesn't know much about YA either. I'm the only one of the few people who at the time when she sold it, she was more clients doing it now. But so we were like, are there any rules? And my editor was really no. There were no limits put on me at all in terms of content, etc. If you read, and it's always been true of YA. It's definitely true now. It deals with some of the kind of darkest and most real, whatever subject matter, and it does not pull punches.
Yeah.
So I really didn't feel like it was any different. I did in the first two books. I did intentionally write from a single point of view because I thought the story is very complex, and I thought that would be easier for a younger audience to follow if it was a single point of view, which was a challenge for me. That didn't come naturally to write from a single point of view. I think I learned a lot doing that. It's hard to write a mystery. It's hard to hide information when you have only one character because you've got to reveal certain things that your point of view character doesn't realize they are what they are, and so it becomes tricky very quickly. So the third book is multiple points of view because I figured if you kept up so far, you could handle the multiple points of view. So anyway, that was one difference, but that's a little bit more about just the series than it's about YA. Because YA has plenty of multiple points of view.
It's funny because I listened to the first two books on audio, and then I got my hands. I was so excited. I texted Chris like, I want it. And I read it, and at first I thought, did I miss this in the first two? Because it did go back and forth with the characters. So I'm glad.
I like that choice because I thought, sometimes when you're reading a trilogy or a series and you just get that one perspective, it was kind of cool in the third book to have that going in those three.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks.
I want to hear more about those characters.
Right.
Do you have any plans With
to
the
add.
characters
It's,
and
I mean,
all,
obviously, it's a trilogy that kind of ends at a beginning.
Yeah.
Not to mess with all of you after the 3 books, but and that was something I was very committed to. It's the idea of looking at something at a moment in time where we discover something. So it's not dystopian. It doesn't imagine this whole world, and it really is like, what would become of us if, like, in this moment. So you could certainly add on to it. If anybody would like to pitch me to do that, it won't be me. I think to me that what I wanted to do with this trilogy is complete in terms of the books. I have so many ideas for, the one thing about a trilogy is you're in one world for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think as a novelist or any kind of writer, you just become interested in, I was just listening to a podcast on the drive up, and that's a good book. You always have new ideas for things. So, but I do, in terms of it moving to television or movies, like I always thought, it could extend, it could live beyond, the end of this book for sure.
We're certainly seeing that these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we wish you luck on that.
Oh, thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the adaptations, the movie film?
Yeah, I mean, this one is has been, I think there's a draft of a script that is, but it's for a film, so I don't know exactly where this one stands. You mean for all the books or for
Wait,
this
is that for
one?
the Outliers
Yeah.
or is that for the trilogy?
To the Outliers. So
Okay.
that's on the first book.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. So it's in development. I don't. So in process. I would say, yeah.
I was hoping you could solve a mystery for me. I'm a huge fan of books written by lawyers in every genre, and I don't know why. I think that I'm going to tell you why I think it.
Okay.
You can tell me. I think in the introduction, Chris said that Kimberly has a law degree, and I think I call them recovering lawyers. So she chose to do other things with her time, but you obviously, going through law school, you have to do a lot of reading, you have to do a lot of writing. I think you have to write we're using a lot of brevity, really. And I think that's part of why I'm drawn to lawyers who write books.
Right.
Because the writing is succinct. Yeah. What would you say about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's the book review should go to law school. No, don't do that. That was a joke. Never do that. I actually practiced for several years too. I think you're right. I think a lot of people, it can also be the inverse. I think so many lawyers end up writers, so it could be just a matter of that. I do think there's a brevity to it. I do think, even more than that, I think it goes to story structure, because you spend a lot of time to structure an argument. That's really what you learn. And so particularly as when I go to write mysteries, I think in particular, you see a lot of mystery writers and lawyers, because you think to yourself as you're writing it, like, what's a reader thinking now? And you do the same thing when you structure an argument. You're like, what's the judge going to say? What's the other side going to say? Even when you're practicing in law school, everything's always about looking at it, taking your argument and flipping it around and looking at the inverse way. And so it's not that your readers are like counter-arguing against you, but you are anticipating what they're going to think when you say this. And that's exactly what you have to do. So I would say that for me, the best thing law school did to help me be a writer isn't necessarily on the sentence by sentence basis, but on the story structure. And I think learning to structure things in that way for sure helped a lot. And you also read a lot of cases about terrible things. They give you all sorts of ideas. And to think, and just to learn to think about things like social justice and fairness. And it does teach you a way of thinking that I think does help you explore stories.
And how did you come to write fiction? Did you grow up wanting to be a writer?
Yeah, I had definitely had fantasies of being a writer in high school, and I had one teacher who was super supportive of that, and she was like, "You have to be a writer, promise me." And I was like, "Okay, but how does somebody eat?" And that really.
How do you make a living?
Right, but it's interesting. When I talk to high school students about the trilogy, I mean, that is a real question. Like, if you don't grow up with a creative family, or you don't know anybody doing, it seems like, how does a person, and that's true of journalism or a lot of these more nebulous fields, it seems like, how does a person do that for a living? So I knew I needed to get paid and eat and I wanted that security. So that kind of immediately, I was like, that's ridiculous. And I still have the short story she wrote
That's awesome.
right on the bottom of, and I remember being like, with my best friend, like, that's ridiculous. And so
Look
anyway,
at you today.
right. And so then, I went on to law school. I had that. I practiced for a few years. And then the reality is, once you kind of have that security, you're like, like a lot of people, you're like at an early midlife crisis, like, oh my God, I'm supposed to do this forever. This is my job. And I just had enough security to explore it. So I took a leave of absence to write my first book. And the thing about writing novels is you just got to kind of write one to find out if you're able to do it. So I took a leave of absence and deferred my law school loans, and I had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of them. And I was able to live off my savings for a year and move to London with my husband and just kind of wrote a book. And in that year, I got lucky. I did write the book in a year. I got an agent, like a good agent, and he came close to selling that book. And I got a lot of really encouraging feedback. I have those letters too. And occasionally I'll run across one of the editors, like who's moved on somewhere else, and maybe they send me a book along the same. I'm like, oh, she was one of my these nice letters. But I lived off of that. So I will say, I feel like a little sometimes like I was like one of those American Idol contestants who gets the golden ticket, but then gets immediately cut. And they probably for a million, like, I got the golden ticket, so I'm gonna just keep trying, And so much of creative arts in general, it's a war of attrition. Like, you get better, the more you do it, the better you get, and you have to stick with it. So I got better. I did have to go back and be a lawyer for a while, and then my husband was a fiance at the time. I subsequently got married, and then I was like, I really want to try to do this. And he, for some insane reason, said, okay, we'll try. And so he agreed to kind of support me and let me do that. Meanwhile, I had children, fit with a time period in our lives. But it took me, from the time I wrote that first book to the time I sold the book, a decade. And I'd given myself a decade. So by the time I was at the tail end of it, I was interviewing for jobs. And I had decided I was done. And reconstructing Amelia, actually, like, in early drafts, we needed work, and it seemed like maybe it wasn't going to come together. So the only reason I kept at it was that was 2009 or 10, and the bottom had fallen out of the economy. And so no one wanted a lawyer that had been out of work a decade. So I couldn't find a job, despite I had this really kind of fancy resume, but I couldn't find a job. So I finished Amelia because I couldn't find a job.
So that first book didn't become a book.
No,
No.
there were four. Sorry, there were four others. So Amelia was my fifth book that I completed.
Okay.
So there are four unpublished novels. I fly on those discs that don't work anymore. On what? They're like on plastic. I don't even know.
I was going to ask you, the author Jonathan Evison, who lives out in Seattle, on an island off the coast of Seattle, said he literally buried
Oh my God,
four
that's so
manuscripts.
funny. I like that.
Because he doesn't want anyone to ever, like, he dies and they get published.
It is kind of scary, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
So, you could bury your desk.
Yeah, I could do something. Yeah, because people often ask me, like, would you go back to those books? And did you say his name was David? Jonathan. So I agree with him. I don't. My books definitely improved over time, and I know how to fix those early books now.
Okay.
What I know now, having done this so many times, I'm like, no, what's wrong with them? But they kind of were early versions of what I ultimately did with Amelia, which was kind of combining. They didn't have the crime story wasn't resolved, and so they basically had the hint of that. And then I was like, and then they just don't really have an ending. And I was like, that's like literary, but it wasn't. And I was like, literary books are fantastic. These were not literary books. They're just books without an ending, which is very different. But I just didn't really know what I was trying to do. And so that is the thing about art and figuring out your voice and trusting your instinct, and it all loops back around. So I needed to figure out a way to create that spine and really get the mystery down.
Yeah.
And then explore the character stuff. But so I once I learned to do that, so I could go back and fix those early books. But there's just nothing. like I said, new ideas are grabbing you all the time. So I'd rather just explore. I already know how those end. Even if I fix them, I already know the end. So I'd like to. The ending is always kind of a surprise how it comes together. So I prefer to experience that fresh.
Don't look back.
Yes, exactly. But I may bury them. I like it. I think I might get in trouble in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Like Prospect Park. But I'm like, I'm just putting my name to the park. Right, burying these things. Right. Maybe.
So mystery is your group. Do you have authors that really inspired you to pursue becoming a mystery writer, or when you start writing, did it just kind of head towards mystery? How did that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. When I was nominated for the Edgar Award for Amelia, which I did not win, and when I was at the dinner and I didn't win, my agent, who I love, leaned over and she's like, "Well, we didn't think you were a mystery writer anyway." Which was so funny. She's very sweet, but and I was like, "Yeah, I kind of wanted to win," but. You know, I didn't know what I was doing, and my books do exist. I never sat down and was like, I'm a mystery writer, and I still, like, I don't know. I get yes, because I like to answer the question, the mystery of what happened. So yes, but I didn't like read extensively in the mystery genre. I would say I just read really broadly, and some of that is mystery and some of that is not. Because, you know, not all mysteries have a huge character arc at the same time. So when people ask me what I say I write crossover. I say, like, you know, mystery with a literary element, you know, because I think it kind of crosses. And I think there's a women's fiction part of it, too.
Yes, definitely.
Because it's looking at a lot of, you know, issues like that. So I've always felt like it was crossover between that. So I read, you know, really broadly. Like, I just was reading Margaret Atwood's Alias Grace, because I'm doing an event on Monday about it, a book club event about it. And that I feel like is interesting because that's kind of like a mystery too. It's exploring a historical murder, and so that I feel like books like that are really inspiring. The way she's able to toggle between, they say obviously she's Margaret Atwood, so she can do anything. She can fly, but she, you know, the way she's able to make it such a compelling character study and a historical. Obviously, she's got the whole historical thing too, and it's so well researched. But she combines a lot of elements there, and that is a mystery too. I mean, it's a why done it, rather than a who done it. And also, my books often. Not the outliers in my two outdoor books, kind of open by kind of, you know what happened, and you're trying to figure out the why. So, broad inspiration, I guess, is the answer. Short answer.
Can we ask you what you're working on now?
Yeah.
I know some people don't like to answer that question.
No, it's so lonely. I want you all to come and be a part of my process. So I just finished, I finished a draft of my next book, which is due to come out, I think, in January 2020. So it's due this January, but will come out next year. It's set back in Park Slope, like my first book, Reconstructing Amelia, and it's more of a legal thriller, going back to your law question. Because I really, it's funny, Amelia somewhere was described as being a legal thriller. One of the very, very early reviews, and I remember being like, legal? Like, there's a law firm in it, but I don't consider that a legal thriller. This has more actual courtroom. So I got to talk about it like it's like, anyway, so I'll tell you what happened. So it opens with the death of a Park Slope mother, and she's found at the bottom of the stairs in her brownstone. Again, for my children's sake, I killed the mother. I killed them. Happy, mother's
Your
dead.
neighbors are going to start wondering.
Yeah, exactly. It centers on a main character named Lizzie, who is she was a federal defender. Federal prosecutor. And she's had to, because her husband is an alcoholic and has lost his job, she's had to go work at a big firm. Federal prosecutors don't make a lot of money. It's very prestigious as a woman back there, it's not a very lucrative job, very prestigious job, not very lucrative. So she moves to a big firm to make more money, to deal with the trouble in her marriage and her husband's problems. And she gets this phone call in her office from a former law school classmate. He's a very successful entrepreneur. entrepreneur, and it's his wife that was found at the bottom of the stairs, and he's in Rikers, has been accused of killing her, and has asked Lizzie for her help. They were friends in law school, and so she's like, no, I don't know anything about murder. I know about, she was a fraud prosecutor. I don't know anything about murder. But he's really desperate. And so not only is his wife dead, but they were at, the night before she died, they were at a couple swapping party in Park Slope. And so,
That's what happened.
yes. My neighbors wouldn't have been it. Sort of, kidding. Anyway, but yes.
I bet you have to be really careful with how you name your
Oh,
characters.
you do.
Your neighbors are reading it like, ooh.
100%. In fact, that's funny because I named. There's only so many names, and also they're in your subconscious because you know people like that are named that. And I named a couple after like literally somebody who lives in my building. I was like, I know them. Why did I just name those couple after that? Like all these problems in their marriage. I was like, no, change that name. Anyway, so that is the book. I would say it's kind of like, Presumed Innocent meets Big Little Lies meets The Staircase. I don't know if you guys have seen that on Netflix, but it's got a lot of, it's a real world case about a man who's convicted of killing his wife. She's found at the bottom of the stairs. Yeah, so it's definitely, that stuff is in there. So a draft is done. It's from multiple points of view, from the perspective of Lizzie and the woman who died, who's named Amanda. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm deep in revisions, which is always my kind of like ugly part of the process. But it's better. You have the whole thing. So I'm kind of, hacking at it, and it's 450 pages, publishing about 350, so gives you space to write and cut back.
Now, do you use an author group or a writer's group or something to do, or is it just you and your editor?
Yeah, no, I haven't. The deadlines, to be honest, on the YA were so tight that like no one read it until I went to my editor because I needed every minute. I haven't had a writer's group for a while, only because of time. I think it would be amazing to have enough time to kind of give it to people and have them read it. I'm meaning chapters one. I don't, let me back up. I would never give something to people as I'm writing it.
Okay.
I know people do that, and I'm like, you're a maniac. Give people stuff. And I know it works for them, and I don't know how that works for them, because to me it would be like, I don't know, just like, in the middle of surgery, like inviting people in, be like, you want to look? Like, what's going on? I'm like, how can you do that? Because then what things people are saying are influencing how, like, it's, I'm still kind of writing the book until it's, thoroughly revised. I want that process to be complete, and I want it to be as good as it can be, and then I can show it to people. But the question is, do I have time to do that? Because then if I'm taking as much time as I can to make it as good as I can. So anyway, but I do long for the idea. I used to have a writer's group, and just getting feedback of people is such an important thing. So
see, I admire that, because I talked to one author and she said she takes her draft. She's in a writing group. She takes her draft. She prints each of them just right away. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of work. She hands it to each of these people. They give her back the comments. She takes one draft with different colored pens. She writes all of their comments on the thing. I wanted to go to bed after she told me that. I was like, that sounds exhausting,
And at that point, has she done everything she thinks she can?
Well, until she sees all their comments.
Right, but then
it was a lot of work.
Right. Well, that stage, by the way, that stage still happens to me. It just happens to my editor and my agent, and like lots of people are doing that at for sure. And you have to integrate everybody's, and you're looking for points of resonance. Like as you find multiple, which is the nice thing about having multiple people. Like she's probably finding that 7 of the people are saying the same thing, which is, and then that one outlier who tells you to, you can be like, I'm not doing that.
You're wrong.
Right, so I can ignore you. So that's why it's so great to have a group, because you have so many people, weighing in, But so we'll see.
I know there's sometimes writers in the audience who are always curious about a writer's process.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you actually write? Like what is a day like?
Especially with 2 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a full-time job for me, so it's like, I go to work at 9 a.m. and I come back at 7:30. So it's a been a job for me actually since I started. So when I said that, like, my husband supported me in doing it, even then, I would say for a decade, I always treated it like a job. So we, like, thought we paid for childcare when we could to make it happen. I got up at 4 a.m. and I'd write before the kids were awake. So for me, it's about consistency and just sitting there. And I always have a word count I need to make it to, or a page count I need to make it to, depending on what stage. So I don't outline. I think you said that at some point. So when I sit down, I'm kind of starting with my my idea, those kind of themes I want to explore. So like for the most recent book, it is really about marriage and kind of what makes a good marriage and what does that mean. And I think there's obviously been a lot of depictions of marriage in a lot of domestic suspense lately. But for me, so a certain proportion of them, or a lot of them, it's like really, really bad marriages.
Yeah.
And there'll be a part when I'm reading them and I'm like, oh yeah, this is my marriage. I'm like, oh no, it's not that bad. It's not. And so I guess I wanted to look at the ground that exists before somebody's doing something really violent or terrible to somebody else, and really how much should you accept, and what do any of us really know about anybody else's marriage? Because I know my husband and I will go out with friends, and sometimes we'll come home and be like, what is that? Like, do we hate each other? Do they love each other? Or do we have a bad marriage? Like, I just find it fascinating, and that's not a point of bad judgment. I just think you have such a limited, even your closest friends, such a limited view into what it is that's really happening, and what really makes a good marriage. My husband and I are yellers, like we fight, but I don't think that's bad in our case, and I think it could, but it could be bad in somebody else's, depending, and I just really find that gray zone in marriage really interesting.
I think it depends on if there's a staircase.
Yes, if you don't fight at the top of the stairs. That will be the moral of my book. But so, anyway, so that's the theme kind of behind the book. So I sit down with my idea, and then I knew there's the staircase, and there's things I want to have happen, and so I know that's going to happen. And then every day I sit down, because I don't have an outline. When I start writing a new book, I sit down and write as fast as I can. Because there's nothing more terrifying than the blank page and the empty document where you're like, this is a book and there's nothing in it. So I just try to get pages down. And my tipping point is always like 100 pages. Because when you've read, I always tell people, I'm like, oh, you read 100, you got to finish the book now. You read 100 pages, you're stuck. You got to finish it. So I just try to get to the point where there's that many pages. And that goes with the word count every day. So I have to write 3,000 words.
Wow.
And so
That's a lot.
But it helps if you really, I always tell people, be willing to write badly.
Yeah.
That is the key to finishing anything. So some days I sit down, I'm like, wow, what was that? Like that whole thing doesn't even fit in this book. But you'll sometimes cut it out, use it later. It will, inevitably you use it in some way. Like you'll find that detour, put you somewhere where you're like, wait a second. Like, why was I thinking that? And you realize, oh, that doesn't fit in this book, but it actually has made me realize that this thing fits in this book. So you just have to accept it's a very messy, if you're not going to outline, it's a very messy process. You get the whole thing in there, and I really think that's the point where, if you were a sculptor, that's like when you write the first draft, you finally got the clay. Like that, now you just got the clay, that's all you have. And so, because I don't outline in the front, I think your work is backloaded. It's all in revision. And so what I'm doing now, like in this, the new Agile book, is going through the entire thing with the computer open, so I've got the actual book there, and I go through each scene, and I'm just cutting, I'm rewriting essentially over what I just wrote. So, and I know I'm going to do so much that it's not time to print it out now, because I'm going to cut whole things. And so now that I got the whole story, I'm like, okay, I know who these people are, I know basically what happened, I'm going to go through and start to make connections. And because then this is where some of the really fun part happens, because you get to places and you're like, that's why I put that in there. And you start to see that certain things you seeded earlier on some subconscious level actually connect and answer questions. And I mean, honestly, that's the part I've been for, because I'm like, oh, that's like magic. Like, how did I'm such a genius. And then you read the next page, you're like, oh, or I'm terrible. Like, this is awful. And so this stage is a lot about that. It's a lot of that, like, wow, ooh, like, you know, and just accepting that there's going to be, and knowing that that's the process. You got to keep, like, shaping the material, and then you have a shape, and then you've got to put the face on, and then you've got to, like, it takes a lot of patience. And then after I've done that, probably for like 2 months, then I start printing it out. And so for me, the last thing that counts is really attention to sentence by sentence language. And I know a writer friend who leads with language. That's her entry point. So she's really interested in the words and the sentences. And I'm much more interested in the story. And so I kind of start with the plot, then I put character on top, and then I put language last. So as I'm polishing sentences, and I love language. But until, you know, I'm moving too much around to kind of get to the point where I'm worried about single sentences. And because my books are a balance, I hope, between the plot and the character, it's toggling back and forth. Because I'm like, all right, I need to tell you I need these things to happen, but I need the characters, if I'm going to answer these questions about marriage and relationships, I need these other things to happen also. So it's finding a balance. But I highly recommend, like, clear hours you're going to write. Always say you're going to sit down at those hours. Lower your standards. Like, have set, things. But I think people get this tyranny of perfection. They're like, oh my God, this is so bad. It's like, yeah, it is. But it's there, and now you can begin to make it great. Because until it's terrible and it exists, you can't make it good. Yeah, exactly. You know, so you need something there to work with, and something to hang your hat on. And there's you're like, oh, I wrote a book. This thing is here. You know, I can't leave it there like that, like ugly and misshapen. So I'm gonna make it, great. So,
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, of course.
And we're approaching 3 o'clock, and you cold? My husband's telling me.
Are you guys cold?
Okay. Well, we are approaching 3 o'clock, and we just wanted to make sure we had some time for questions. If anyone has a question for Kim.
Don't be shy.
Somebody has got some sort of.
Yes.
Did you ever have contact with the teacher that encouraged you to be a writer?
You know what's really cool, cool and sad, is that she passed away. She was at the time when I was in high school, she was, probably in her 70s at the time. So I think she passed away a few years ago. I got into contact with her son, who's a professor actually at a university, I think in Ohio. But I did an interview I went to boarding school for my school, and he saw it, the interview, and he reached out to me, and it was really cool. I mean, I lived on her words for a long time. And that's the thing about being a writer, when you're in these kind of dark moments, which, by the way, also happen after you've even gotten published. You can fall back on that, and she really was extraordinary. So I was glad to be able to be in touch with.
Yeah. So, for me, I think it's a big accomplishment to write one paper, and you're writing upwards of 200 pages at least.
400. Give or take.
And so, how do you just find enough stuff to write about that accomplishment?
No, it's a good question. So the awesome thing about having come here for 5 years is I remember when Vaughn was so much younger. Now Vaughn's gonna take my job.
Yeah, now Vaughn's
Co-op.
Yeah, we'll go on.
I'll be a baseball.
I'll write half a page.
He's an executive. I like it.
Just wants his name on the cover. Let's be clear.
It's a good question. I think people are overwhelmed by that too. The idea of it's just so large. But Anne Lamott has great advice about this. If you haven't read Bird by Bird and you're an aspiring writer, you should read that because it's got some great advice. But she really is keep the window small. The Bird by Bird references to a project her brother did where he had to identify every bird species. And he had a nervous breakdown, and her dad was like, "We're just going to take it bird by bird," and that's really what you have to do. And I mean, I'll go. I'm talking big talk here. I'm going to go Monday, open my computer, and have a breakdown when I see it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of. You should be like, and then I'm like, no, calm down. Just this page. I'm just going to do this page.
Yeah.
And so it's redefining the book as the problem for today. We're going to tackle. Like, so you turn your book, your enormous 450-page mess that awaits me, into one page. And just today, I'm just going to fix the scene. That's all I'm going to do. And then it's like a lot of things. I am a long distance runner, and part of the reason I do that, it's the same thing. It's like you don't wake up one day, or at least I don't wake up one day and think I can just go run 26 miles tomorrow. And you just think, just today, I'm going to do this one thing, and it will build. And it does. And I think the thing is, you have to stick with it long enough to know that does happen. It seems impossible, but it actually is just built one day after another.
I have a question about the agent or an editor. So the agent is the person that is working to sell it, and do they do most of that for you, so you don't have to?
Yeah. So the process of kind of getting an agent, if you want to sell your book to a traditional publisher, which is kind of one that will have books on the shelves in bookstores, because there's a whole route now that didn't really exist when I started, which is a whole self-publishing route, which most of the time means your books aren't necessarily in bookstores, but there's a whole way to reach an audience. But if you want to go with traditional publishing, an agent is the way to go. And despite what you hear, it's not like it's harder to find an agent than it is to find an editor. This is not true, and doesn't make any sense if you think about it, because lots of books are not. So it's a funnel that works this way. And you don't need to have connections. You don't need anything. There's a great website called agentquery.com, which I always tell people to go to, and it gives you. You can search on your genre, you can search on the city you want. It's a great resource, and then you can cross-reference with places like Publishers Marketplace and Publishers Weekly and see what recent deals these agents have to find an agent that's right for you. So there is a search process to find the right agent. Once you have an agent, you participate in that process to the extent that you make your manuscript as great as it can be, and you help with things like pitch letters, which sometimes will be an adaptation of the letter you have used to get the agent. So writing that query letter, which helps, is what you use to get an agent. You send a letter that just describes your book. They then say, we'd like to see, 10 pages, 20 pages, what have you. And then if they like that, they ask to see more. That query letter is your gateway to everything. So learning how to write that query letter is the key. That skill has virtually nothing to do with writing a book, which is problematic. It's still a really important skill. Because you will use that skill, that marketing skill, again and again and again as an author trying to reach your audience. But you got to dissociate the two skills. Imagine like you're trying to write flap copy for a book. Like what would make a reader be like reading the back, like, wow, I want to read this book. That is your job when you're writing that query letter, because an agent is literally reading hundreds and hundreds of those a week. And so they're getting, especially now in the advent of email, they're just getting them. It's so easy to query 100 agents because you just fire off a bunch of emails. So you need something, an agent's looking, is this the kind of book I sell? Do I have the right context to sell this book? Does this letter grab me? So those are really the things. So having like writing experience, meaning publications or awards, those things help. But in my experience, it's that amazing letter. Because every agent is looking for that undiscovered person who doesn't have any. I mean, like, what agent doesn't want that? Like, that's great. So don't be discouraged by that process. You do need an agent, though. Like, if that's traditional publishing is the route you want to go, they usually will edit your manuscript with you. They will usually have notes. So if you're looking for an agent and they're saying things like, we want you to make these changes and then I'll look at it again, that's totally, if the changes make sense to you and you agree with them, that's a normal part of the process. If they ask for money as a part of the process, I'm not kidding, it happens a lot. That shouldn't be happening. Nobody should be asking you for money. But it's totally normal for an agent to be like, and then if you don't like what they suggest, sometimes they're like, this YA book should be, or this adult book should be a YA book, or you should make this trilogy one book. you may be like, that's not what I want to do. And another agent might love it the way it is. So there is such a subjective business. So you have to, the key is balancing what you're hearing. Now, if 10 agents say to you, this goes back to the writing group analogy, they all say, do this, then I'm guessing you should probably do that, whatever that thing is. But that query letter, again, I can't emphasize enough, do not get discouraged if you're getting hung up at that point. What that means is you write a crappy query letter. That does not mean your book could be a Pulitzer Prize winning, the best book ever. But you still need to learn to write that letter because it's like a key way.
But that means you need an editor too, because they're working with you on your script, transcript. Is that correct?
On the manuscript, you mean?
Yeah.
The editor is the person that you're going to sell your book to. You can hire an outside editor, which are people, there's a million people who do that, who will help you shape your manuscript before you try to go get an agent. But I would say, I would just be cautious about that because an outside editor is, and they're outside because they're not employed currently by a publisher, is only as good as that person is good. And like, you got to be careful. You don't want to be putting, until an agent has said, if you have an agent say, fix X, Y, and Z, and you don't know how to fix it, then it might make sense to go to an outside editor to help you figure out how to do that. But I feel like agents, when an agent is saying to you, fix this and that, and I'll help you sell this, you're a partner with that person. If you're putting your hands on the sides of an outside editor, again, it just goes back to its subjective business. So like, just be careful who you hire if you're hiring an editor. But that person's somebody you'd have to pay. You're only getting to an editor after your book is sold. And so your agent will probably do some editing. That's what they do. But the true editor is not tough to the sale.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think we should probably wrap up so Kim has time to sign books for those of you who would like that. And we're going to keep our ears and eyes out for that forthcoming book.
Yes.
January 2020.
Yes,
We'll
yes.
be there.
At your seats. In a year and a half.
Thanks so much for coming.
You're doing all right.
Okay.
Say goodbye to Facebook people.
Oh, hi, Facebook. So thank you all for coming. If you'd like copies of any of Kim's books, she's happy to sign them. We have them all right up at the register for you. And thank you again to Chris, Emily, and Kim.
Thank
Thank you all. I'm wondering, this is